Good morning. My name is Abdulhakim. I was born and raised in Matondoni. Professionally, I teach English language and literature, Lamu Boys Secondary School. So before I start, first of all, I would like to take this opportunity to thank and appreciate the good work that is being done by Lamu Youth Alliance. There are a number of programs that Lamu Youth Alliance is actually rolling out, from Tusome and other good programs. So one of the programs that Lamu Youth Alliance have actually initiated is this program, the e-learning program, which is a very good program, and it is a program that is going to assist and help our candidates. Remember, our candidates are in limbo. They are confused because the government is insisting that the exams are still on and they are at home. So they are actually confused. So these e-learning lessons is going to assist the candidates, and at the end of the day, they're going to get one or two things. As for COVID-19, I want to tell my brothers that Corona is real. And there is a lot of misconception, the myth about Corona. But Corona is real. Let us actually follow the government directives. Let us actually listen to what the Ministry of Health is telling us. We need to observe social distancing. We need to wash our hands. We need to stay home, and so on and so forth. And we also need to update ourselves on various issues about coronavirus. So I want to take this opportunity because this is my first lesson, and I know this lesson will be of benefits to most of the candidates and learners in general. So today I'm going to teach English. And the topic of our attention, the topic of our discussion, we are going to discuss a grammatical aspect, and that is active and passive voice. Active and passive voice. This is one of the grammatical aspects, and it is massive, very wide. The only thing is that students should actually be aware of is that it's not very difficult, as most of the people would think. It is very easy. The only thing is that because it's a grammatical aspect, it has rules and regulations. If you are going to grasp rules in grammar, then it becomes very easy for you to perform. So when we talk of grammar, if you grasp rules, if the rules will be actually at your grip, then it becomes very easy for you to perform in grammar. So active and passive voice. Before we actually, before we get into the grasp of this discussion, let us first of all, although most scholars do believe it is not good to define grammar, but just because we want to bring it to our understanding, let us first of all define what is active and what is passive. So let us actually first of all define what is active. Simply in a layman language, active voice shows when subject performs an action. That is simple. When subject performs an action, we say such kind of voices, such kind of sentences, we call them active voice. And we're going to give examples of each. While on the other hand, passive voice, subject receives an action. When subject receives an action, then it becomes passive. For example, you can give very good examples. If, for example, we give an example, we say, Fatma writes reports. here in this sentence, we have subject, we also have a verb, and at the end of the day, you also have an object. So in this kind of a sentence, because subject performs an action, then we say such kind of sentences are active voice. When we change the same sentence, for instance, and we change it into passive, we say reports are written by Fatma. Reports in this sentence becomes our subject. Are written becomes our verb, of course. So such kind of sentences, we call them passive. Why? Because subject actually receives an action. So you can see the difference. In the first sentence, we say this is active voice, AV, while on the other hand, this is passive voice. Why? Because the first sentence, it is subject that performs an action, while in the second sentence, it is actually the subject that receives an action. So at this level, we can actually now distinguish between the two. That is active and passive voice. So after having explained this, now it will be prudent if we go ahead and now see how we can actually change our sentences from active to passive. There are a number of things that you need to consider as a student, as a candidate. If you actually come across such a question, there are a number of things that you are supposed to put in your mind, especially when you deal with active and passive. These are the things you are supposed to be very careful with. Number one, you need to consider the verb tenses. The verb tenses. In other words, the tense of the verb, whether it is present simple, past simple, present continuous, and so on and so forth. That is one. Two, you also, if we are going to discuss this, we also need to discuss the issues of changing pronouns. You need to have a vast knowledge about pronouns and how we use pronouns from subjective case to objective case. And we're going to see that. The other thing that we also need to be very careful here when we discuss about this, we are going to briefly discuss about how imperative sentences are changed from active to passive. Remember, imperative sentences, we are going to discuss that. These are actually sentences that give orders and command. For example, sit down, come here. These are what we call imperative sentences. So when we reach here, we also discuss how these sentences are actually changed. It's very simple. You don't have to worry. You don't have to be confused. We are going to discuss how these sentences are actually changed from active to passive. And maybe the last thing that is also very important, we are also going to see how modal verbs are actually changed, how we can change in sentences where there is a modal verb. So let me start from the first one, verb tenses. Let me start with that and see how we can change our sentences from active to passive. Remember, there are very many tenses. And it is not all tenses that can be changed. We are going to see that. There are specific tenses that we can change from active to passive, but not all tenses. Let's start with present simple tense. Present simple tense. So how do we change our sentences, our active voice from present simple, from active voice to the passive voice? Let us have a good example of an active voice. You can say, Simon feeds the dog. This is a very good example of present simple sentence. Simon feeds the dog. So in this sentence, it is very important we actually, first of all, we see where our subject is. So here is the subject, Simon, and then feeds is our verb, and I will call it verb 1. And there's a reason for that. And then the dog is our object. So Simon feeds the dog. Subject, verb 1, and object. And let me write it here. Feeds is our verb 1. Fed is our verb 2. And fed here is our verb 3. Feeds, this is present tense, this is past tense, and this is past participle. That's why we say verb 1, verb 2, verb 3. So the formula is very simple. To change this sentence, we need to have another sentence which is passive, and we say the dog is fed by Simon. So here in this case, the dog becomes our subject, and then here we have the verb. Subject, verb. So this is very simple, and then maybe this one is not very must. It's not a must that we say by Simon, because the main aim of passive voice, the main aim, because naturally all sentences are active voice. But we only bring passive voice because there are very many reasons. One, it can be, for example, we don't want to mention a person who does an action. Two, we may actually use passive voice when we forget. Sometimes you don't want to mention, sometimes you forget who does an action. So we can actually use passive voice there, and so on and so forth. So the formula is very simple here. S plus V1 plus O. That is the formula. And here we also have our formula. It's S plus B plus verb. This is actually verb 3. That is the formula. So even most of the time we do believe that the formulas are only in mathematics. But in a real sense, we also have formulas in English. So any sentence that actually will have this formula, it will have the other formula for passive voice. Simon feeds the dog. We have S plus V1 plus O. And then to change this sentence to passive, we'll have S plus B. B, when we talk of B, this is a form of B, whether is, was, are, and so on and so forth. So this is present simple tense. Now we can go ahead and discuss about past simple tense. Past simple tense. Past, number 2, let's just say here, past simple tense. When we talk of past simple tense, there are very many sentences that we can have. For example, we can have the donkey carried the sick. The donkey carried the sick. This is a very good example of past simple. So in this sentence, we also have subject. On the other hand, we have verb 2. Remember, this is verb 2. We say past tense, it's actually verb 2. And then we also have an object. To change this sentence to passive, you need, first of all, to have object. Your object becomes your subject. and then you also change this one to past participle, and so on and so forth. So in this sentence, we'll say the sick was carried by the donkey. The sick was carried by the donkey. So the sick here becomes our subject, and then was actually is form of be. Remember, we said form of be is either was, is, or are, and so on. And then here we have our verb 3, that is past participle. And then here, of course, it's just the object. So, and this is not a must, as we said. You can just omit this. It's not a must that you say by. You know, by, for example, by donkey, or by, you know, something like that. So this is how we actually change our sentences from active to passive when it is past simple tense. The third tense that we can actually discuss is actually past. Let's say present continuous tense. Present continuous tense. So here we can have a very good example of a sentence which is present continuous tense. For instance, we can have a sentence like Ali is writing composition. Ali is writing composition. This is a very good example of present continuous tense. So in this case, remember Ali, this is very important. The formula is very important. You need to actually disintegrate subject from verb from object. By doing so, it will be very easy for you to change the sentence from active to passive. So Ali here is our subject. Of course, his writing here is our verb, and this is actually verb 1 plus ing. Ing is continuous, and this is our objective. Our object, I mean. So to change this sentence to passive, you will say composition is being written by Ali. Remember, I said you will not be disqualified by not writing this. This one is just an option. It's not very must. So we say composition here becomes our subject, of course. Is a form of be, and then we also have being plus verb 3. Remember, we said, for example, in this case, write will be verb 1, wrote will be our verb 3, and written will be our, this is verb 2, and this is our verb 3. So this is how we change our sentence, and the formula is very clear. Here is subject plus be form plus verb 1 plus ing plus object. And this formation makes present continuous tense. For you to change the sentence from active to passive, this is the mode. Composition is being written by Ali. So subject plus be form plus being, that is ing, plus verb 3, and so on and so forth. I think we are very clear here. Let us go to the past continuous tense. Past continuous tense. Yes, past continuous tense. Let us have a very good example. Here we can say, for example, Lamu Youth Alliance was Lamu Youth Alliance was taking all the credit. Lamu Youth Alliance was taking all the credit. So here in this case, we have our subject, Lamu Youth Alliance, which is Lamu Youth Alliance, and then we also have our verb. Remember this verb here, we have form of be plus verb 3, plus verb 1, because it's just take, verb 1 plus ing. And then all the credit will be our object, past continuous tense. So in this case, we can change this sentence by saying the credit was, of course, was being, because remember, it is ing, and ing always it's continuous, so we say was being taken by Lamu Youth Alliance. In this case, we have our first verb, that is take, verb 1, and then we also have took, which is verb 2, and then we have taken, which is verb 3. So here we will say the credit is our subject still, was is form of be, and then plus being, and then we also have verb 3 here, and then here we can say we have our object. So this is the mode. It's very easy. Once you get this formation, it will be very easy for you to change the sentence from active to passive. The other thing that we can actually go ahead and discuss is about future. Just simple future, and then we go to other business. So future tense, future simple tense, future simple tense. In future simple tense, remember we normally have will and shall. Will and shall. So in this sentence, we can say, for example, Muhammad will construct a house. Muhammad will construct, or Muhammad shall construct. So here we have subject, and then here we are having our verb, and this, remember, it's just verb 3. Here we also have our, let's say we have will here, plus verb 3, and then this one is our object. So this is very simple. Muhammad will construct, or Muhammad shall construct. So will and shall shows. So Muhammad is our subject, will is our, actually shows future or shall, and then here we have our verb, here we have our verb 1, construct, and then here we have a house. So for us to change this sentence, we will say a house will be constructed by Muhammad. So in this case here we can say construct, we have construct, verb 1, and then constructed, verb 2, and then we also have constructed, which is past participle, verb 3. So here we say a house is our subject, and then will is our future. Of course, we say will here, and then plus be, and then plus verb 3, and then object. So for you to actually get the passive voice in the future, you need to have this formula. You have your subject, you have your future, that is either will or shall, and then here you have be, and then plus verb 3. So these are some of the tenses that we can use actually is very simple. Although there are some tenses that you cannot actually change sentences from active to passive. For instance, you cannot change your sentence from active to passive. It is future continuous tense. Or for example, if it is past perfect continuous tense, it is not easy. So for today, we are going to stop here. Of course, there are other issues, as I said when I was introducing, how to change the pronoun from subjective case to objective case. There's also an issue of how to change sentences, especially imperative sentences, from active to passive, and so on and so forth. So when we get into that, we're going to learn more. Thank you very much.